Hello, and welcome to my kitchen. My name is Ridley, and this is my kitchen as I found it. Today we're going to be doing our final stop in France. It's been the long-awaited Tarte Flambée, which I've talked about for several weeks now, and it's finally actually here. So Tarte Flambée is from the Alsace region of France, which is just on the border with Germany. And so there's actually a whole lot of crossover. So this particular dish is called Tarte Flambée, which means like a flamed tart, but it can also mean, an additional name is flammkuche, which is flame cake. What I think is fun about this is that when I think flambé, I think liquor over something and then burn the liquor off to cook it. So like flambeing scallops or something like that. This is not really a tart. You don't flambé it, nor is it a cake, and nor do you light it on fire in any way. So the name for me is really different and interesting, but the history that I heard about it, this may be apocryphal, is that it was flame or wood fire ovens, just like when we did the pizzas. And then when they were warming the ovens up, in order to test the heat of the oven, they would actually do this really quick flatbread and see if it cooked fast enough. And that would be how they would prove that the flame was hot enough, that the oven was hot enough. Now, as far as the dish itself goes, it's pretty simple. It's a basic dough with just a cream sauce, onions, and bacon over the top. And it was oftentimes just made, like I said, on baking day to test the ovens. You would make a really simple meal out of everything, and then you're good to go with bread for the week. And so this was sort of a testing bit that also became a meal. So to make it, it's really, really simple. It is just some flour, along with oil and some water and a little touch of salt. And this is going to be to make a dough. Now, if you notice, there's no yeast in this dough. So because of that, there's no resting period. You don't need to really let it leaven. You don't need to let it rise. You're just going to be putting this together. And that's also going to create a much crunchier, thinner crust on the bottom of this. So much more akin to, say, a flatbread or a super thin crust pizza than to the Neapolitan pizza we tried before. For the actual toppings itself, we have this cream base right here, which it says to use creme fraiche. Creme fraiche is something that is not really available in any grocery store that I have access to. There are ways to make some from home that are pretty easy, but they take 24 hours, and I did not have the time to prep this. So this is a substitute that I found where it is half sour cream and half heavy cream. The sour cream is going to give that fermented tanginess like the creme fraiche, but creme fraiche tends to have a lot more fat content. It works better at higher heats, so we're tempering that a little bit with the heavy cream. So that'll be the sauce, and then on top of the sauce, a tiny bit of a spice mix here. Now, the seasonings in this is just salt, pepper, and nutmeg, and I saw a bunch of recipes that just use a little pinch of each. Not necessarily a specific measurement of any of them. I actually saw a pinch as the measurement in several recipes. So I mixed those three together to make a quick seasoning to go with the sauce. And then the ingredients are very, very simple. We're just gonna cut up half of this onion here into little slivers, and then we're gonna fry those up to get a little bit of caramelized onion. And then we also have some bacon. The recipes that I found say you want about 5 ounces. I've upped it to 8 ounces because I want more bacon. But we're gonna cut these into thin strips called lardons, and that is gonna be pretty much the entire topping set. Now there is an optional ingredient that I will be adding in, and that is gonna be some Gruyere cheese. You can use Gruyere or Emmental. Gruyere is gonna have a little bit more punch to it. I wanted something a little salty to kind of offset the richness of the bacon, and then Emmental would be a little bit milder, but we did that last time when we made the crepes. So this is going to be a very, very quick prep session over here. I'm going to mix together the dough. I am going to slice the onions and the bacon, and then that is all the prep. We're going to move back over here, roll it out, and make some little flatbreads. Now in here, I've just got some all-purpose flour. I didn't see anything that specified a special type of flour, so all-purpose should be your go-to for this one, for just about anything. A tablespoon of oil. I'm using some olive oil right here, and a 1/4 teaspoon of salt, just a little bit there. And then it says a 1/4 cup of water, or maybe a touch more. So I have a little more than a 1/4 cup in here. I'm gonna mix it in as it is, and then we'll be able to adjust from there. Now this one, we're not gonna be looking for the same kind of smooth elasticity as you would in a standard pizza dough. It said it'll be a little bit shaggy, but we also don't want it to be runny or thin like a crepe dough at all. And as far as kneading it goes, I also saw in most of the recipes that you can just let it sit and sort of roll it out if everything is fairly well incorporated. Otherwise, a very brief knead can be done just to help incorporate all the ingredients together, but it's not going to be there for building up the gluten structure that's used in leavened breads. So, just like with the pizza dough, some very, very gentle mixing here. We are not making nearly as many pizzas out of this, so I have a much smaller amount of dough to work with, but that's fine. And this can be scaled up if you want to make more or less. I think I'm making enough to probably do 2 of these tarts, but because there's no rising or anything, it's a very quick thing to put together and you don't have to wait the whole 24 hours for your dough to be ready. Beautiful. I've got almost all of the flour incorporated here. It's got a little bit of shagginess to it, but it's not super, super dry. It is coming together as a dough, which I think is what we're looking for. And more importantly, it is not in any way, shape, or form runny. And it's not super sticky or tacky. I'm not having trouble with it sticking to my hands at this point. And the biggest flavor or scent that I've got coming from this right now is just that little hint of olive oil. So just be aware that the oil that you choose here will have an effect, most likely on the finished flavor of it. Probably not as pronounced as I'm getting off of the fragrance because nothing else in here has a strong fragrance, but it's important to know that if you want something a little more neutral toned, you can use rapeseed oil or grapeseed oil or something like that. All right, I think that is fine. It's definitely not going to have that supple effect to it like a really kneaded pizza dough would, but at the same time, everything is thoroughly incorporated. I don't have any dry areas, and it's not super, super sticky. So I'm gonna say that that's probably good, and I don't think I need any more water at this point. All right, now for the onion itself, we only need a half of a medium onion. I was able to get something medium-esque this time, so feel pretty good about grabbing this one here. Although I should have brought the trash can over, but instead you get to watch me go over here behind the fridge to where the trash can normally lives. Beautiful. All right, now for this one, I want to try and get nice slivers of the onion. And so I am going to cut in half here and then just cut through at an angle towards the center. There are probably much smoother ways to get this done, but this has always worked pretty well for me. Always make sure that you are keeping your fingers back away from the blade when slicing down, because the blade will not have any sort of safety feature for you if you don't put it in yourself. We have our half onion sliced here. I might not use all of these, but I am going to caramelize all of them up, just so that way when we get to the point of making the tart, everything that we want to have available will be available. And because I really don't have any recipes that use 1/8 of an onion. Close enough. And then for the bacon, very, very simple on this one. Lardons are just going to be thin strips of it, or if you've ever seen like cubed pancetta, you can do that as a lardon as well. If you have strips of bacon like this, it's going to be just cutting it into thin strips across the whole side of the bacon. Then, once we've got this sliced up, as we've seen in a lot of other recipes, we're going to be cooking the bacon up first, so that way we can render the fat out of it and use that as an ingredient to cook the rest of the dish. So we're going to render down the bacon bits, we're going to caramelize and cook the onions in that fat, and then we're going to have those two items available as ingredients to put on the finished flatbread once we've rolled it out. So, just a few minutes of slicing and dicing. And also, you can get all of these ingredients in the specific state that they would be in for the recipe if you want to. So you can look for pre-sliced onions. I've seen them in this format. You can get bacon bits and bacon ends just like this, either pre-cooked if you want it really, really ready, or you can just get them ready to cook so that you can follow all these steps from there. So do whatever makes the most sense for you, because I think that all of it is going to still work out really well in the end as far as a delicious little dough. Flatbread dough. All right, so we've got our bacon sliced into lardons. We have our thin sliced onions. We have our dough, which is ready to get rolled out. So this is absolutely everything on the prep stage of this. So let's head back over into the kitchen proper. I'm gonna set up a really quick silicone mat for us to roll out our dough in, but aside from that, the next step is just putting together the tarte flambée and baking it. So let's move over. All right, so we have set up a little area over here for us to roll out the dough on. I'm gonna get that rolled out nice and flat just to make sure that everything is set right there. In order to get things underway, let me pop into the oven here. We're gonna set this to 450. And then just like with the pizza, I have our pizza stone already in there preheating with everything. Now, I'm gonna try something a little different with this particular recipe because I found several different variations and most of them were to cook directly onto a sheet pan. So I'm gonna try something just slightly different in the middle. I'm going to roll this out onto a piece of parchment paper so that then I can use the parchment paper to lift the super, super thin crust and get it onto the pizza stone. Otherwise, I don't think even with the pizza peel that I have, that I would be able to realistically get a really thin, thin dough onto it in one piece, especially not with toppings and other things on there. So we're going to grab the pizza dough, or not the pizza dough, the tarte flambée dough. I'm just gonna cut this in half, because it should be enough for two. And then we'll get this rolled out, and I should be able to see then more so what we're looking at as far as space goes on the overall amount of tarte flambée that we're making. Now, the instructions that I've seen for this, as far as how thin to roll it out, are pretty much as thin as you can get it. So if you think you can go a little thinner, keep going. Now it specifies to roll it into a circle or an oval. I'm gonna kind of do the best that I can. I've never been the greatest at maintaining geometric shapes with dough while rolling them out, but you know, it takes practice. But this dough does do a very good job of allowing you to roll it very thin. I'm not really having any resistance to the rollout. And I'm getting it plenty thin too. Ooh. Yes, and we're getting to the point now where I can even kind of see my fingers through the dough that it's getting that thin. So you can get very, very thin on this one. I have no idea how thin we're supposed to go, but I can go thinner. So according to the recipes, gonna go thinner. is not going to be a pretty tarte flambée. It's going to be a misshapen ball of love. All right, you know what? I think this is plenty thin dough, so I'm just going to do a quick flip on this. Keep it under the parchment paper to make sure that it doesn't dry out. And then I am going to fry up the onions and the bacon, and then we are all ready to put everything together and get it in the oven. So quick shift right over here. Let me grab a pan out and we will get cooking. All right. We have got our dough rolled out, so that one is ready for topping and setting up once all of the ingredients are done. I am preheating the pan just a little bit. We're gonna throw the bacon in and render it down, just cook it up. You want a nice crispy pieces of pork or bacon there. And then we're gonna use that fat to fry up the onions. So this is gonna be a very quick cleanup because we're gonna use essentially one pan. The cutting board was used very briefly, a knife, a pizza stone if you're using that. So this is a very quick recipe and also a quick cleanup. So even better. Oh, I love the smell of bacon. And then the smokiness from the bacon, that is another thing that specifically the recipes were recommending using a smoked bacon. So if you can find, I think this is applewood smoked, but you want to make sure that you're using a smoked bacon, not just a standard cured bacon, as you like that smokiness as part of the flavor. We have fried up our bacon. It's getting nice and crispy here. I should actually put a little bit of paper towel on here to drain off the grease. Perfect. So we're gonna pull this out real quick, put it onto the paper towel to drain off just a bit, and so you can see that we've got nice browning on everything. It's gonna be nice and crispy, so that's gonna add a textural element to the finished flatbread, tarte flambée. And then, now we've got all this delicious, delicious bacon fat that we can cook off our onions in. So same pan, keep everything on heat, add in some onions. And this should be a pretty quick fry on these since it's already pretty hot. We just want a little bit of golden there, a little bit of browning, tiny bit of caramelization in the onions themselves, and then we'll be ready to build out our tarte flambés. We have cooked down the onions just a touch. They are softened, a little bit of browning going on, but we don't have full caramelization on anything. We want to give it enough space or leeway that when we get this into the oven, we don't want to burn them by the time they're out. So let me pull these out onto prepped plate as well. Got a little bit of browning, but nothing crazy. I've got a paper towel on this one as well, just to help drain them out. I didn't actually see that in any of the recipes, but I don't necessarily want a huge greasy or a huge amount of grease on the top of the flatbread, just because that's going to really affect how crispy I can get the crust, but I do not want these to be soggy at all. They should be crunchy and crisp. And after pulling these out, that is everything on the stove as well. So we are done with this. We can get this started on cleaning. We're going to move it out of the way real quick so that we can prep the actual toppings for the flatbread themselves, and then we're going to get our first one in the oven and give it a try. Now, very similarly to the pizza, the traditional version of this would be in a wood fire oven and it would be cooked very, very quickly. With the Neapolitan pizzas, we were looking at 90 seconds. I think these were looking at around the same, maybe even a little less time given how thin they are. So because of that, we're using the pizza stone to get as best as we can. I could probably pump the oven up a little bit more, but 450 for about 7 to 10 minutes seems to be the consensus for how you can get decent results using a home oven. And this is just to help break up some of the bacon bits and everything that had been cooked onto the bottom. It's a lot easier to get these off of the bottom when the pan is still hot with just a little bit of water. Stay. All right, we've got these here, and then let me prep this space right here for us to actually put the flatbread together, and we'll move from there. All righty then. So let's give this experiment a try and see if we're able to use the pizza stone with this really, really thin dough. So I am going to add on my creme fraiche, or my creme fraiche substitute. If you've got the creme fraiche, use the creme fraiche. Now I tend to like a lot of sauce on my pizzas and things like that, but given that this is something that we want to get really crispy, I think that I'm just going to go with kind of a nominal layer. It said that you want to leave a little bit of area around the outside, so that's going to be sort of the equivalent of the crust on this. It's not going to puff up like it did with the pizzas because we don't have any yeast in here, but it will at least give an area around the outside to differentiate and give a place to grab onto if you wanted to eat it by hand. All right, got that in there. We're going to do a pinch of the seasoning. Now for this, I'm just going to try and get a decent spread around it as best as I can. Again, there were really no measurements for this part, so season to taste. I probably have a little bit extra pepper in the mix because I like pepper, but feel free to adjust to your preference. So we've got a little bit of that in there. We're going to then grab some onions. Now for these, it just said to spread them across the surface. So I am going to try and get some decent coverage without going too crazy. But again, this has no measurements to it, so it is measure with your heart. Now I have a little extra bacon because I made more than I needed to, so this is probably more than you would find on your traditional version. I like me some bacon. All right, so we have the onions, we've got the bacon, we've got the creme fraiche sauce on there. Now let's see what we can do about getting this onto a pizza stone using the parchment paper. Excuse me, cookie. Ooh, we got some smoke too. All right, got that on the pizza stone. That worked much nicer than I was thinking it would. We're gonna close that in there and give us about 10 minutes. So we'll see how this one turns out, and if there's any adjustments that we need to make, we'll figure that out in time for our try number 2. We're at 8 minutes, 8.5 minutes now, and we are already getting some nice crisp to this crust. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull it out now because I do not want to burn it. Ah, yes. But I think that a big part of this is because we were using the pizza stone, the recipes that I was looking at have the longer times, and that accounts for not having that retained direct heat. So I'm getting a really nice crisp to the crust here, some browning around the edges. Everything about that looks fantastic. Now for this one, we have the creme fraiche sauce, the onions, and the bacon. On this next one, I'm gonna be including the Gruyere so that way we can try the super traditional version and we can try something that's a little bit different. So let me just slide this over to the side. We have rollout number 2. same thing. We're gonna add our cream sauce to the base here, leaving a little space around the outside just to make sure that we've got that crust-ish area. Not gonna go too crazy on the amount of sauce because I do not want it to get soggy. And it looks like it did a pretty good job of cooking up over here. I was a bit worried about the heat, exactly. I was a bit worried about the heat tolerance on the creme fraiche because that was really what I had been told is the main difference, is the fat content in it versus sour cream. But this one did not burn or anything, so I'm very excited for trying it with the Gruyere. Now we've got our onions again. I think that, again, this is probably a little more toppings than I've seen on some of the images, but I'm hungry and that might be influencing how heavy-handed I am with toppings. Bacon, delicious amounts of bacon, and some accidental floor bacon for the dogs. They heard it from a mile away. And I'm just gonna go ahead and bacon it up. And then last but not least, this one we're going to be using that Gruyere on. I'm just gonna do a nice little layer of it. This is definitely not a cheese that I think you would wanna do super heavy. It's got an incredibly strong aroma to it, a very punchy flavor, and I think just a little layer is gonna be plenty to add a nice kind of salty undertone to go with the richness of the cream. All right, so we've got that one there. Now let's try this one more time. Excuse me, guys. Excuse me. Barely fits on there, but it fits. Get this closed, and then this time I am going to set it for 8 minutes because that's how long it took last time. We may have lost a little bit of heat retention from doing the back-to-back, but around 8 is a good time to check. Yes. All right, so this one at 8 minutes is looking just about perfect. So I think if you're doing it on a pizza stone, adjust your timing to be in the 8 to 9 minute mark. So we now have our traditional tarte flambée along with the one with the Gruyere cheese, so we can kind of see both side by side and see which we prefer. But we get to try the super traditional one at the same time. So I'm gonna let Bruce get some decent shots of these ones while I set up our tasting area, and then we'll get some tastes. All right, so we have got Bruce joining us again. We have our traditional ungruyered tarte flambée on the right here. And on the left side, we have the Gruyere tarte flambée.
A tarte flambée that is not a fruity, delicious dessert.
I mean, you were expecting something very different when I said the name, weren't you?
I very much was, yeah. This
Perfect.
is not at all what I pictured.
Also, in my looking through several recipes, one of the things that I read was it's like a pizza that you made on a cracker. And I don't know if I would have gone from that to making the recipe, but I can say, having made this, I get why they said that.
That's fairly accurate, it seems.
It's not a cracker dough by any means, but it's crunchy.
Let's try the traditional side first.
Try first.
Here we go. Wow.
Wow. So the sweetness from the onions is super prevalent. And then the nutmeg that was in the spice blend plays with that sweetness in the most unusual of ways.
So the bacon also kind of very much blends very well in it as well.
The smokiness, I mean, Cookie's interested in the smokiness.
Yes, I bet she is.
There's another time when all the flavors put together are not what I thought they would be, but I have no complaints. I understand why this has persisted for so many years, because it's delicious.
It's delicious. is very simple, which it wouldn't be the first. I mean, the pizzas were also delicious in their simplicity.
Right. So my very favorite thing is when Bruce arrived here today, he looked at the ingredients that I had set out, and he said, "Is that it?" Now, to be fair, at the time, the bacon was in the fridge. So it was literally like dough and onion, which I get. But it all works together exceptionally well.
Yeah. It didn't take super long either.
And it's similar to pizza, but I would not call this pizza.
No.
It is its own different thing.
I wouldn't even call it a flatbread pizza.
Or even a thin crust pizza.
Yeah.
All right.
It's a pizza cracker.
But with its own deliciousness. Like, that's not a bad thing. And given how fast this was to make, I would have no problem throwing this together on another day because the prepping step was 2 minutes. It was cutting up an onion and cutting up bacon, and everything else was just and mixing some flour. But everything else was just roll it out, throw it in the oven. It's delicious. I'm excited for the cheese version.
Yeah. Here we go.
Now immediately, I can tell it is not as crispy on the cheese one.
I actually like that. I like it more.
But the flavor of the cheese is so good in that.
I like this one better. But they were both delicious.
The cheese helps to, I think, elevate some of the ingredients so that you're really picking them up. Like before, it was a very smooth, mellow mix of flavors. This one, things are jumping out at me. I'm getting the bacon a lot with this one. And the nutmeg, again, just adds a little bit of that. Cookie's so upset.
I know.
I also think I like it more with the cheese than without.
Yeah.
And I do think the Gruyere here with the extra punch would be better than the other suggestion, which was the Emmental that we used for the crepes.
Right, the breakfast crepes.
Yeah, delicious breakfast that also had a name. It was last week. Cookie. What did we make last week? What did we make?
We made bouffe bourguignon
Oh yeah, it was 2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago. Anyway, that's it for this.
Yeah. So, we're moving on to our next country next week. I think it's Spain. Not entirely sure. But I can't wait to see you next time and to try something new.